I Hate Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. I am Sunil Dasgupta. In 53 years of living, I have never personally known a live organ donor. And then suddenly, over the last year, 2 friends donated their kidneys. Many of us choose to donate our organs after death, but live organ donation seems like a gigantic step to me. For this week's episode, going into Valentine's Day, I talked to Ashley Waters and Eric Saul, who donated their kidneys to people they knew but were not close friends with or family members. If you are new to the show, I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society functioning precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. It is my hope that this podcast will help those who feel left out reconnect in our local communities. When Shannon speaks. Music for this episode comes from the Airport 77s, a 70s power pop and new wave band from Silver Spring in Montgomery County, Maryland. Andy Sullivan on vocals and guitar, Chuck Dolan on bass, and John Kelly on the drums. We are playing songs from their 2021 album, Rotation, which got a lot of play and was named the #1 album by the Evan Davis Show on WFMU in New Jersey. In honor of Valentine's Day, I'm going to skip the news and go directly to our love letter. Ashley Waters lives in the city of Frederick, just north of Montgomery County. She has been many things, including serving as a communications manager for the city of Frederick. These days, she heads a local nonprofit and continues to be the boss lady of Frederick's Oktoberfest. Eric Saul nearly of Tacoma Park, because he lives just outside that nuclear-free zone, sandwiched between Montgomery County and the District of Columbia, is an architect not only of homes, but also now of the famous satirical website, the Tacoma Torch. Wait, this is going to be fun and moving. This week, there were 106,552 patients on the transplant waiting list in the United States. On an average, 17 of them will die every day. While kidneys and livers constitute most live organ donations, tissue, lung, and other body parts can be transplanted as well. If you want to know more about organ donation, go to organdonor.gov.
Super great, but do you think he's like on a date? If he ordered the Chardonnay, would you order the Chardonnay?
Eric Saul, Ashley Waters, welcome to I Hate Politics.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks, Sunil.
both of you donated kidneys in 2021. Ashley, let's start with you. How long has it been? How's the recovery?
It's been just over a year. So I donated in early January 2021. So I'm a year in, and I just got my annual checkup done. My numbers are great. My numbers are like I have 2 kidneys. So they're very happy, and the recovery's been very easy, actually.
What are these numbers you speak of?
They test your blood and your urine to make sure you're processing waste appropriately, and they monitor certain numbers. They also monitor your blood pressure very closely. And so I have my own blood pressure cuff now here at my house, all that medical stuff that I don't fully understand, but I trust that they're, monitoring the right stuff.
Okay. Eric, how long has it been for you? How's the recovery?
Good. I've almost exactly 3 weeks from my surgery. So I had a 1-week appointment afterwards, and it was basically, all right, you're good to go. Have alcohol, have whatever you want to eat. You don't have to be on a low sodium diet. It was actually kind of shocking how it's been. I'm recovering well. I'm probably 95%, a little bit of pain from the surgical, incisions, but I'm walking around, moving around. I'm not allowed to exercise for 3 more weeks. So they told me 6 weeks of just being lazy and, watching TV and relaxing.
I like some gory details. How big is the incision?
It's about 1.5 inches over my belly button. So I always thought they took it out from the back, and everybody kept asking me like, whoa, they got it from the front? I think in the movies, whenever someone removes a kidney or whatever, they end up in a ice bath in New Orleans. I think the scars are always on the back of that, actor. But they take it out the front, so right above the belly button, and then I have 2 laparoscopic points. They took out my left kidney, so it's on my left sort of love handle on the side here.
I'm very jealous, Eric, because they used one of my previous incisions from a previous surgery. So mine is like 3 inches below my belly button. It's probably 4 inches wide. I have 4 other ones. So I always say I have 5 gnarly scars from my kidney surgery now. So I'm very envious of yours.
Oh my God, that sounds painful. So the one thing I know about the both of you is that both of you love to drink beer. So apparently Eric has the license to go back to beer drinking. What is your post surgical beer drinking experience?
It's been really sad. I haven't had a beer yet. I don't drink alone. And so, no one's been, because of Omicron and everybody's sort of, staying away from each other. I haven't had anybody to have a beer with. So, but maybe you could be my first, maybe we should get together and have a beer.
Okay.
So it is weird after the surgery because they ask you before you donate how much you drink. And so you have to be honest about how much you're drinking. And so they told me what I was drinking would be okay for me to drink afterwards after I get past, the period that Eric's in now. But I will say that alcohol affects me differently now with one kidney. Again, just your body processing certain things. People often think of your liver being the one thing you can kill with alcohol, but your kidney has to process all that as well. And so I try to work in non-alcoholic beer. I'm now a big proponent of non-alcoholic beer. There are some great options out there. And because we can't get beer shipped to us in Maryland, the cool part is you actually can get your non-alcoholic beer shipped right to your house. And so we have multiple beer shipments coming in. And so if I'm out, for a tailgate or something like that, I'll have a beer or 2, and then I'll work in a non-alcoholic beer. A lot of our local breweries where I live are working in non-alcoholic beers into their offerings as well. So the NA movement is definitely helpful for someone who just feels the effects of alcohol differently, but I still enjoy my beer.
Okay. 2 things. One is, what is the difference in how you process, how you feel, how you process alcohol?
I think the biggest thing is that you only have one kidney and everything has to flow through that. And so my body, for instance, I feel the effects of alcohol. So where I could have had 2 beers before and I didn't feel like I was intoxicated at all. If I drink high ABV beer now, and a lot of breweries around us have 8, 9, 10% beers all over the place, I just tend to feel it more now. And so for me, it's just important to make sure that I don't drink to get drunk at this stage of my life. I drink to enjoy the beer. So I just try to work in the NA beer when I'm drinking more than 1 or 2 in a sitting.
Well, that's what you needed to hear, right, Eric?
Yeah, maybe I'll be a cheap date. You can buy me only 2 beers instead of 4.
I'll give you some NA beer, the near beer recommendations. There's a lot of good ones. I'll tell you which ones are good and which ones not to work on, Eric.
So,
Great.
for just so you all know, Ashley is the organizer of the Frederick Oktoberfest.
Yes, and I'm trying to get non-alcoholic beer on that schedule. I think next year's the year we'll actually have a non-alcoholic beer option for people there.
Yeah, well, nothing like losing a kidney to figure this out. All right. I want to talk about where you all started in this process. Eric, you go first and talk about, when the decision came for you, how you found out and what did you do? Sort of lay out the process for me.
Sure. My process has probably been a total of about 1.5 years from the time I learned about my friend needing a kidney to the actual transplant. So I coach baseball. I coach private lessons. I used to coach teams. And this is one of the parents of a kid I coach. And other parents had put the article, he was in the Washington Post, by the way, for needing a kidney. And one of the parents had passed that article around on Facebook, and I read it. And I have to say, the person who wrote the article, she put a link at the very bottom of the article of, if you want to donate or see if you're a donor, click here, and it took you to Georgetown MedStar, their donor program. If that link hadn't been there, I probably would have just read the article and not really thought about it. So I don't know. I just got curious, clicked the link, and within a couple of days, someone got back to me and asked me a bunch of questions. I came in, they did a whole body physical. It literally was like a Cadillac physical. I mean, they took 40 vials of blood. It's amazing how many blood samples they took. Full body MRI, they urine test, the whole thing. And I don't know, within a couple of weeks, they said, you're a direct match for, your friend. It wasn't a hard decision, I have to say, at that point, because they had gone through the whole process and said, look, a donor has no real worries in life. Your lifespan stays the same. There's no research of any sort of negative effects, other than some minor stuff, probably. And maybe it's not a bad thing, but the alcohol thing Ashley just talked about, but that could be a positive thing, if you will. So I don't know. I kind of, the analytical brain that I have is just like, well, there's really no effect on my life, so why not? It wasn't a hard decision. I'm just happy that I was a match. Had I gone through that whole process and found out, sorry, you're not a match, I would have felt worse. I would have felt terrible because, he literally didn't have anybody else, I don't think. So we were supposed to do the surgery 1 year ago, and it got delayed because his levels had to get down to like a 15% function, and he was in the low 20s, I want to say. For a while, they did some clinical trials, they did some other things, and it kind of stabilized, but then they keep going down. So anyway, it just got to a point where it was time. So probably, let's see, our surgery was January 6th on Insurrection Day, by the way, which was funny in itself. We had a lot of good stop the steal jokes going on for our surgery.
What is really interesting is that both of you seem separated from the medical portion of this entire exercise.
I don't know. I kind of tuned out when they get into all those specifics. My question was like, hey, am I going to be okay? I probably should have asked a lot more questions. But yeah, I don't know. I just sort of just said yes and just went forward with it. I didn't think about it.
But do you think that this is a way to deal with the sort of, there is some trauma associated, right? So is it a way to deal with it, to just sort of disassociate yourself from the trauma, not to know?
Possibly. Yeah, that's probably a good point. I haven't thought about it, but yeah, I guess.
And when you say what made a match, what makes a match?
Yeah, so I feel like the blood is part of it, and then they do a handful of other matching. But the way they described it to me is that they could have a handful of matches that match at like this high level, but what they're trying to do is find the best compatibility. So they take stuff, like things from your donor and something from the recipient, and try to make sure that it's not going to reject it, because just because you're a match on the top level doesn't mean you're going to actually have an organ be accepted by the other person. And so that was my biggest fear, was even after I was selected as the match, like we could go through this entire thing and I could be down a kidney and my recipient may not work. And that's just terrifying, right? To give up an organ and then have it not work, because then you can't give another one. You only have one spare kidney. You can't give them both.
So the other interesting possibility that you all raise now is, suppose you rule out somebody as a close match after going through these tests. Will they then consider you a match with somebody else and say, will you give it to somebody else? And that other person maybe match with this? Or do you really are focused on giving it to that one person that you've decided to give to?
There are a handful of things they do. So one, there's the direct match. Like, my friend needs a kidney, I'm a match, great, right? Which it seems like Eric and I both fell into that category. There are times where they do this kind of cross-match thing where, let's say, Sunil, one of your family members needs an organ and one of my family members needs an organ, but I'm a match for your family member and your family member is a match for my family member. So they try to find people that would they're giving an organ because of their relative or their friend, but it's not going directly to them. There's like basically two entities that are crossing to hopefully solve two people's issues. And the third piece is just donation. And I know people now, because people talk to me about this more now that they know I donate an organ, where they were like, you know what, I'll just give it to anybody. And I will say that going through the process, I think Eric mentioned this, once you go through all these tests, right? So you're doing these forms, I did many Zoom interviews. I had to go down and get all these tests done in DC. And so you get to a point where you're like, well, if I know my kidney is viable and I can live without it, why wouldn't I help somebody? It may not help my friend, but how do you say no to a stranger that may need it, knowing that you could help them? So I think, you start out with the one-to-one, it could go to the cross thing, but then you could just end up deciding. And they also tell you that if you decide you don't want to give it to someone else, no harm, no foul. It's not like you're going to get like a negative mark on your file. They understand it's a big decision. And so they're willing to talk with you about all those options if you want.
Okay.
Yeah, they were really supportive of us and saying like, look, this isn't like a pressure thing. We're not going to, if you are laying on that surgical bed and they're wheeling you into the room and you say, no, I don't want to do it, they will, support you in saying no. So, and the swaps, going back to the swap thing, where you can be a match for other people you don't know. And those swaps can get very intricate, like a 10-person swap. So they say, one kidney donation could open the door for several other people to get a kidney. And I don't know, to be honest, I don't know if I would have done that. I wasn't opposed to it, but I just hadn't thought about it because I was a match. But yeah, that's like people have been very kind and said, oh, you're doing such a good thing for doing this. But I think, so whoever does that, that's another level to me. That's like the true hero. If someone donates their kidney to someone, they have no clue who it is.
Ashley, how long was your process? When did it start?
Yeah, so my process was about a 3-month process. It was late October, I guess that would be, of 2020. I was sitting on my couch one night scrolling through Facebook, and I saw a post from a fellow friend from college. He and I were in the blue band together at Penn State, and he actually married a band member as well. They were both sousaphones and they married each other. And he put out a post and just said, we've been dealing with this for months, and I think we're finally ready to ask for help. His wife, Alyssa, was in end-stage kidney failure, and they had determined that the only viable option was for her to get a transplant done. And she's a few years younger than me, so she's in, her late 20s, maybe she's 30, 31 now. But I was sitting there looking at the post and just kind of reading the comments and whatnot, and decided, I'm like, I don't really know what they've been up to lately. Like, we stay in touch via Facebook a little bit. And I started clicking through their pictures, and they have this most adorable little girl. And the one thing about becoming a parent is that your mind just shifts, right? Like, I can't watch certain movies about kids anymore. Like, there's certain things that just make me super emotional. And looking at these pictures and knowing what she was going through, I mean, her daughter was like 3 or 4 years old. And like, I can't imagine not being able to do the things with my child. I have a 7-year-old, like that age is so fun. And if she doesn't get a transplant, she's not going to see her into elementary school or middle school or high school. And so the mom in me was like, meh, screw it. I'm clicking on this link. I'll give it a whirl. Why not? What's the likelihood I'm going to be a match, right? So you get through the first phase and you answer all these questions. You're like, I'm a relatively healthy individual, sure. But, I'm probably not going to, then you get to the next phase and then you keep going. And like Eric said, they take so much blood from you. You get an EKG done. I had to carry this like basically a milk jug of urine around for a day. I had to collect my urine for an entire day, which is really weird when you're going to work and you have to like carry this obnoxious thing around with you. You do all this stuff. And so I still remember, they had no idea I put my name in. And so I still remember the day they texted me and said, we need to talk with you. And so they called me and they're like, we had no idea that you were putting your name in. Like, oh my gosh, like we haven't talked probably in 3 or 4 years. And so, for me, it was really the mom connection of just like knowing who they are as people, knowing what it's like to be a mom and wanting her to fulfill all of that. And so then we went through the process of getting everything scheduled. We got through the holidays because we found out before the holidays. And then we actually, it was inauguration day of 2021. So a very eventful day in DC was the day that I donated my kidney. And then, I was home within like 36 hours, which is kind of bizarre that you can donate an organ and be home like the next afternoon. But I was, and then it was just, allowing yourself to rest like Eric's doing now, which as you know, Sunil, is very hard for me. I'm a busybody. I like being active. So I had to just pick a show to binge on Netflix and allow myself the time and space to rest. But really ever since then, my kidney immediately started working. And so I knew as soon as I came out of being under and everything, that everything was going fine. And it's really just been great to watch her thrive. And, I get pictures of, little things that they're doing now that she wouldn't be able to do before. And it's just a really great joy to see her living a much more fuller life now, just a year later.
Okay. What series did you watch?
I binged Grey's Anatomy. There's a lot of seasons of that, so you can really get through it. And speaking of the crazy organ swap, there in fact was an episode where there was like 10 organs swapping at a time. So it was very kind of ironic and funny.
Okay. All right. I want to talk about the counseling piece, of course. You talked about the medical piece, 40 vials of blood and all of that. But I think a very critical part of this is the counseling piece. What is the counseling you received? Where did it come from? How, I assume this is all on Zoom because of COVID, but, go ahead.
Yeah, so all my counseling happened over Zoom. And every time I met with anybody, I met with a surgeon and I also met with a social worker. And so they were constantly talking. Before I even got to the point, they went through a kind of like a mental health check, if you will, of just asking how stable you felt, because this can be, I think you used the word trauma. It can be very trauma inducing before, during, and after for people. And so they ask you a lot of questions, but they also just give you a lot of information. They also check in with you regularly to make sure you don't have any questions or anything's happening. So I feel like for me, they definitely have a checklist of things they go through, but it was multiple meetings with multiple people to make sure I understood the physical and mental impacts of doing something like this. Some people do go into kind of like a post-surgery funk, and they say to, watch out for that, and they want you to be aware of what's happening. And so it's really just important to have your support system as well. So I think there was the medical counseling that was happening through MedStar for me. And then it really was just talking with my family about it. And it just so happened, because I was donating to a friend at Penn State, I had a lot of Penn State people that wanted to talk with me about it. And for me, I felt comfortable with my mental health state based on all the information I was gathering. But they really do a pretty extensive job of making sure you feel ready and you understand everything. And they ask you that a lot to confirm it. So I'm not sure how often people don't make it through that part of the counseling, or once they learn that information, they kind of back out. But for me, I think they did an abundance of job.
Yeah, they really, we had several meetings about that. Mine was a year and a half waiting. So we had a lot more. I don't know how long you waited, Ashley, but we just had delays from things. So, but yeah, everything on Zoom, obviously. And I thought the most interesting question they asked too was, they ask me all the time is, did anybody offer you money for this surgery? Which at the time I was like, oh man, nobody did. I wish they would have. But then I was like, oh wait, I know why they're asking this question, because obviously they don't want to create this sort of like black market for kidneys or whatever. But that was one thing I really remember, and it kind of shocking me to answer that. But no, they don't. Obviously, no one paid me. But one thing that's really good that they do is offer you like a 15 up to $1,500 per week in like lost wages reimbursement. So I think they give you like 2 weeks of that if you apply and you want to do that. So they do help people who lose work. So that's very important if for people who do want to go through that process. And but yeah, it was interesting. For me on the psychological part, I remember asking my my social worker, is it weird that I just don't really care? Because I didn't really have this sort of like emotional, or traumatic sort of feel. I just kind of wanted to get it over with. And I said, I really just don't care. And she kind of giggled. And I was like, yeah, I mean, it's not like I don't care, but I just don't really have any sort of sadness or fear or anything. I just kind of want to do this and get it over with. So I don't know if Ashley had a similar feeling. I don't know what your feelings were, but that was sort of mine through the whole thing. It was just taking a long time.
Yeah, I remember telling my husband, I'm like, I'm not emotionally attached to my kidneys. I don't even know what they feel like. I couldn't even point them out in my body if you asked me to. And so it is kind of funny, but I guess, they must have data to suggest that afterwards people do have this sense of loss, that's the reason they're asking all these questions. At least I would assume so. But yeah, it is kind of interesting. I'm like, I can't tell it's gone. It weighs like 0.4 pounds. So it's not even like, I experienced anything like a weight loss from it. Like it's just not there. I have no idea. Besides my scars, I would have no idea it's not there. So yeah, but it's a very interesting process and it's very thorough. And we both went through MedStar, and MedStar has the financial perks as well. So Eric mentioned the lost wages. They'll pay for someone to be at a hotel nearby if you're not local. I think one of the reasons my process went so fast is because I was local. And because of COVID, I know there were people so my recipient's brother lives in New England, and they couldn't get him because of COVID to a hospital to get the appropriate testing done that needed to be done to figure out if he was a match because of COVID. So COVID, I think, made their process on my recipient's end much harder because people couldn't get to where they were going. And luckily, I live close enough to DC that I could go right to the hospital that she was going to be at. And there wasn't a need for people to fly across country and do all these things during COVID, because I know that's definitely slowed some people's donations down.
Did you all do any research, like internet research, WebMD or whatever it is, before, as you decided? What did you do?
For me, I Googled a bunch of things and just tried to make sure, I had the right information. And I asked, a decent amount of questions at my beginning appointments just to make sure I understood the implications of certain things. Again, I don't have an extensive medical history, so I wasn't too worried. And obviously they look at your family's history and there was nothing really that came up from that. But yeah, the thing about MedStar is that they're part, and I wish I could find what it's called, but they're part of some program that only 12 or 13 transplant centers are a part of. And so I think that's probably why they're so popular. Around here, it really is the place to go. And I found that in my research as well, is that MedStar was a very reputable place to go. And like I said, they really do have a great suite of different specialties to walk you through every single moment of it.
Do they offer you any post-operative medical care? You could come back and say, I'm having this problem or that problem, or is that not part of the deal?
They told me that if I have any issues, I could come in, and I think I even have some, I don't know, not like a contractor or whatever it's called, but I have some form stating that if there's anything related to this surgery, that, becomes an issue, that they'll take care of it.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you have your initial meetings, right? And then you have one at 6 months and you have one at 12. So I just had my 12-month appointment and I won't have another one until 24 months. And then that's my last official appointment with them. And then they just recommend you go to a primary care doctor once a year. And again, make sure you're monitoring your blood pressure and things like that. But yeah, anything related to the surgery or impact from the surgery right now, while I'm in this 2-year period, is covered by my recipient's insurance as well. And so not only does MedStar make sure that as a donor, you're well taken care of, but then you also aren't paying for anything. And they try to make it, abundantly clear if you end up with any bills or anything coming to your house, because sometimes there just might be a mishap. And I did get one. They give you a number to call, they take care of it, and you never have to experience any of it. So they try to make sure, you have everything you need. Luckily, my recovery was just really smooth that I didn't need additional medication. I didn't need to be seen. My incisions healed well. But they are there for basically 2 years to make sure you're doing okay.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the macro problem of organ donation in America and in the world. I'm sure as part of your research, you looked into, how many people donate, what the success rates are, how many people are on the waiting list. Do you have any sense of that?
I think the stat that stuck out most to me is the number of people that die every day on the transplant list. So there are over 100,000 people waiting for organs right now. And living donation is such a small part of what people think about when they think of organ donation. They tend to think, I'm an organ donor, my driver's license. If I die, great, my organs will go to help. But the problem is that I think it's 15 to 20 people are dying every single day on the transplant list. And so there definitely is a problem. I think that living donation is just not talked about enough. And so it makes it hard because, again, your liver does regenerate. So if you donate part of your liver, it regenerates. You have a spare kidney. And I don't think people necessarily understand that it's relatively low impact for you to do those things.
Eric, what was your research?
I knew nothing about this going in. I didn't give it 2 seconds of thought if I was ever going to donate a kidney. I am an organ donor on my, driver's license, but that's when I'm dead and gone. But I think now this process, if anything I want to get out of this, especially this podcast, is to let people know that they should think about it. And it's not that hard. If you're a donor, it's really, there's no, I think 5 years ago, if someone said, you're going to donate a kidney, what do you think would happen? I would probably say well, I probably can't drink alcohol anymore. I probably would have dreamed up different scenarios about how bad it would be, but really none of that exists. You can go live your life just like anybody else, like you were before you donated your kidney. And having learned that during this process was really the eye-opening thing for me. Some people were shocked I was out of the hospital in 2 days. They thought I was going to be in there for a whole week. So people were really kind. They were bringing me food, and neighbors were super sweet. I think I didn't eat a home-cooked meal for 2 weeks because people were just dropping off food. Or giving me DoorDash things because they thought I'd be in a bed for 2 weeks. So I really want to get that message out that it's a lot easier than you think to donate a kidney. It's not easy. You're going to be in pain for 24 hours or so from the surgery. And there's a little process, but overall it's nothing.
I found out that largely it's in living donor programs are largely about kidney and liver. But Ashley, you found something more, right? There are other things that can actually be donated by living people.
Right. And I think kidney and livers are definitely the most popular or the more well-known and probably the most needed. But according to HRSA, the Health Resources and Services Administration, you also can donate a lung, a part of a lung, part of your pancreas, and part of your intestines. So I'm not sure what the process is for those organs to be donated. They might be a little bit more extreme than what we're talking about with the kidney, but it is possible. And then there's all sorts of tissue that can also be donated as well that some people may need. So there are a lot of things that we're walking around with that we can do with a little less that could really help somebody.
Is there an age limit on donation? Do they not want 53-year-olds or is there a...
No, I know plenty of people that donated in, kind of midlife 40s, 50s, 60s. They do so many extensive tests. They don't want to wipe anyone out, so they do the tests just because, again, there are people that are very healthy at that age. And like I said, I met numerous people at the hospital that were in their 50s donating. So I don't think age is the sole determining factor for anybody.
Kidney infection, right? What is the advice you got about that?
I don't remember them mentioning anything specifically. The one big thing is that we can't, ask us to not take NSAIDs. So like ibuprofen, Advil, those types of things. Tylenol we can take. Tylenol is okay. The other ones are not. And so that's the one thing from a kidney processing point that they talked about over and over and over again. Like, please be careful what you're taking. So when I have a headache now, I'm lucky I don't get headaches very often. When I do, I try to just hydrate and eat. And then if I need anything, I will take Tylenol. But I don't remember them talking too much about kidney infections, but more about just, again, like think about what you're putting in your body because now you only have one kidney to process it all. Cold medicine as well. So like, for instance, cold medicine, you have to make sure you're not getting something with Advil or ibuprofen in it. We have to get acetaminophen instead.
Yeah, that was the big thing for us because we always had Advil in the house. I never even thought about it. So yeah, we switched everything to Tylenol. They did ask if if you drink a lot of protein shakes. It wasn't like one protein shake a day, but if you're like a bodybuilder and you're drinking like 4 of these things a day and you're just overloading with protein, that could have an effect. I'm strong, but I'm not bodybuilder strong. So I don't have to worry about that. And then they said, just drink water. Some days I was pretty bad about drinking water before. I would probably go a day drinking like 1 cup of water sometimes and just wait till I'm thirsty to drink like most people. But they said, try to stick to a regimen of drinking like 2 to 3 liters a day. Try not to like get over dehydrated. So if I haven't done any exercise yet, but when I plan to do running or any kind of sort of like distance, sports, if you will, I'll probably be more mindful of my water intake during that.
Is there any other sort of, apart from NSAIDs, any other kind of prohibitions that you have to live with now?
No, that's the big one. I know Eric right now is probably he's in the no exercise, like kind of depleted energy. But honestly, after about 2 months, my energy was back to where it was pre-surgery. I was able to work out. I don't really have any issues with any of that. Like Eric was talking about at the very beginning where they used to like break your rib and go through the back. And there used to be a lot of other things in that time of kidney donation where it's like, you can't play extreme sports anymore. You can't do all these things. And they've learned a lot more and they've debunked a lot of that.
Yeah, it's been pretty easy. I mean, I have to say, I'm like, well, give me something to do. Do I need to test something? Do I need to take a pill? Tell me what I need to do. Because I feel like I'm not doing anything right now in terms of managing my 1 kidney left. And they've just been like, no, go live your life, do what you did before. Just don't, obviously, you shouldn't be drinking a ton of alcohol anyway. So just don't do that. But no, it's shocking how little change I've had. And I'm only 3 weeks. And the next day in the hospital, they were feeding me bacon and eggs on my hospital plate. So clearly they know what they're doing and know that, it doesn't really have much effect to take out 1 kidney.
Drink more water, drink less alcohol. There seems to be many positive aspects to this. So on the one hand, you say that, your life hasn't changed, but on the other, your life has changed. Maybe even for the better, because you're probably living a more healthier lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like I pay attention a little bit more to what I'm eating. Because again, I mean, it's important. And the hydration piece is a big thing as well, like Eric was saying. Is I think it makes you a little bit more accountable to yourself. But it's nothing like stressful, right? Like I'm not trying to make these changes to lose a ton of weight or to do certain things. It's really just to maintain an active lifestyle and to, make sure I'm good in case anything would happen. But I feel like that's so minimal. And, I think I did an okay job of that before the kidney thing that right now I just, like I said, I just try to bring exposure to the process and the fact that I'm living with one kidney. If I'm eating ice cream, I'm going to share that I'm eating ice cream from a local place. If I'm like out, playing with my son, I'm going to advertise that. Like for me, it's just a way to show like, hey, I'm living my life. I don't make the best choices all the time and it's not going to kill me, because they tell you to think healthy, but the doctors always tell you that, right? That's not kidney related. That's just what we all should be doing.
We haven't talked about family yet. How did you approach your family? How did you talk to them about it? And especially you have a young son, Ashley. I mean, how do you talk to a child, or did you?
Yeah. So, the one thing is that my husband is probably one of the most supportive people on this planet. And, you know me well enough that I like to do a lot of things. And he's always just like, go save the world, Ashley. Like, just go do you, be you. And so when I told him, I said, hey, I like registered for this thing. And I got to the second phase and he's like, of course you did, because that's just you, of course. And so when I was a match, he's like, of course you'd be a match because you're the one that's actually going to go through with it. And so for him, I think he was a little bit worried. I mean, it's surgery.
So you didn't tell him before you registered?
No, because it's like a simple form, right? And I was like, why? Just put, it takes you like 10 minutes to fill up some basic information. So I didn't tell him until I actually made it past first thing. And then we talked about it, and, he knew my recipient and her family. And, the funny part was trying to talk to my son, who, again, was 6 at the time. And it was a great opportunity to talk about just, giving to others and supporting others when they need you and the various ways you can do that. We do a lot of philanthropic work in my family. And so I'm always trying to foster that in him. And I think it was an awesome opportunity. In fact, he drew a picture for us where it was 2 women in these hospital beds with this kidney in a cooler. And my recipient actually got us like t-shirts made with it on. And so I think, and her daughter sends me postcards, like drawing kidneys and stuff. So for me, it's definitely something where I think having the kids be aware of what's happening is just going to allow them to be more aware of what the needs are in the world. And so my family was super supportive. Andrew had to help me out of bed. I think I mentioned because I had such a lower incision. Because they didn't want to give me a brand new incision for that. I couldn't really sit up very easily for about a week and a half. And so like every night when I had to get up to pee, because your one kidney's learned how to function by itself, my husband was up with me, getting me out of bed and getting me back in bed. And so it definitely was a family effort from the whole way of getting tested, the whole way through the surgery and the recovery. I'm very blessed to have great friends and family who were very supportive. And because Penn State is such a big part of my family, the Blue Band did all this stuff. They wrote an article about us, like all this thing. So it's been fun to just reconnect with people in that way and to hopefully be a model for my son, which is always a good thing.
Eric?
Yeah, my experience was very similar. We don't have kids; it's just my wife and I. But I filled out the form, and like Ashley said, like you don't want to like tell anybody because it's just this form you fill out. But once I made it to the next round, that's when I think I told my wife too, and she was really supportive. I mean, I give her like the most praise of all this because she, like Ashley's family. I mean, she like helped me get to the hospital and make sure I had everything I needed, and put up with me for a week after the surgery. But I didn't tell my extended family, like my mother and my other friends. I didn't tell them for a while. I think it's because I wanted to make sure there was a date set before I did that. So I didn't. I think I told my mom like literally a month before the surgery. She's like, wait, I didn't know this. And I think my other friends knew, like really close friends knew. I told them, but and they might have shared it through the grapevine. So I had like some people that knew before my mom even knew. So that was interesting. But no, I think everybody, I don't think one single person was like, oh, you don't want to do this. This is crazy. Everybody was really like, oh, cool. Like, that's brave of you. And a lot of people said they wouldn't do it. But no one really tried to talk me out of it.
Yeah, I got a lot more like shock, like you're doing what? Like from my friends, because again, people don't realize it and they don't realize how honestly relatively simple it is, all things considered. But I know for me, the hardest part with the family stuff was that I gave in the middle of when most hospitals weren't allowing anyone to be in the hospital with you. And so my recipient and I were in there by ourselves. Our rooms were right next to each other when we recovered, but we couldn't have anyone in with us. And so we're just kind of sitting in the hospital by ourselves after this like huge thing comes to kind of a culmination. And so that's the one thing is like, I just wish I could have had someone in the hospital with me to help over the first 36 hours that I was there. Nurses were still very stretched thin. I mean, it was a rough time to do it during COVID at that point when restrictions were still so high. But otherwise, I couldn't have asked for anything more from my family and friends. They were all very supportive.
So, yeah. But luckily they had the surgery. They almost, well, I wouldn't say they almost canceled it, but there was a threat that if Omicron had kept surging, that they could have postponed the surgery. So it was a real big issue 3 weeks ago.
Eric, on social media, you indicated that you were sort of trying to avoid the hero complex. How do you deal with that?
I don't know. Like, I guess, and that came up because a Washington Post reporter who wrote the original story about my friend Elliot needing a kidney, she said something when we were just talking in our interview, and she's like, "Oh, I'm going to say that, this, but you probably don't want me to write that you're a hero." And I said, "No, please don't write that." It was just something that I told her. And then in the story she wrote, Eric said, "I'm not allowed to call him a hero." So that's how the whole thing came up. It's not like I was going around saying "Oh yeah, please nobody call me this." I mean, obviously I'm aware that I did a really good thing, and I'm not trying to humble brag or anything like that. But I don't know. For me, it's I'm just happy. I'm really happy that my friend's life is saved. That's I don't think if you look at the opposite of that, right? If you could have done something and you didn't, I think I couldn't live with myself. So I look at it that way. I look at more of the opposite effect. It would be worse if I had never checked that, clicked on that link that took me to the website and tried, and now my friend's no longer alive. And it's I don't know what I would have done if that would have happened. That I can't even fathom what I would think.
Well, in a few days, it'll be Valentine's Day. Do you have a Valentine's message for our audience?
I mean, I'm from Tacoma Park, so things get kind of hippy dippy lovey. Love everybody. I don't know. That's a good question. You have to come back to me on that one.
Ashley?
So like I said, I love connecting people to the living donor thing. So this Valentine's Day, share your spare. There's, a lot of things. Your kidney almost looks like a heart. So why not give it to somebody else?
Ooh, that's a good one. I don't think I could top that.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Shirt off a lot. If you order the creme brulee, would you order the creme brulee? You never had nothing good to say about creme brulee.
That was Ashley Waters and Eric Saul, two living kidney donors, with a Valentine's Day love letter. To know more about organ donation, visit organdonor.gov, a website maintained by the Health Resources and Services Administration, a federal government agency. The national nonprofit that manages the U.S. transplant system is the United Network for Organ Sharing, available at unos.org. Both Ashley Waters and Eric Saul highly recommend it. MedStar Georgetown Hospital's Living Donor Program. To find them, Google MedStar Georgetown Transplant Institute. If you want to support Ashley Waters, go to Frederick's Oktoberfest. This year, they will even have non-alcoholic beer. If you want to support Eric Saul, subscribe to the Tacoma Torch at tacomatorch.com.
She does the sing with her hips when she swerves and she dips when the music's not even playing. She does the thing with her eyes, keeps me mesmerized all day. She does the thing to my heart, makes it stop and start. I think it might stop pumping sideways. She does the thing to my head, you know she's just gotta have it her way. Oh, girl, when we hit that groove.
That's all for this episode. You've been listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. Music for this episode comes from the Airport 77s, a 70s power pop and new wave band from Silver Spring. Andy Sullivan on vocals and guitar, Chuck Dolan on bass, and John Kelly on drums. We are playing songs from their 2021 album, Rotation. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone who might want to, please email us at ihppod@gmail.com or reach out on Twitter at ihppod. I hope you will subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics and life close to you and your home. Happy Valentine's Day.